The next item of business is a statement by Neil Gray on ensuring safe maternity services in Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to you for the opportunity to make this statement. Members will be aware of the publication this morning of Healthcare Improvement Scotland's report into acute maternity services at the Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh in NHS Lothian, and also the BBC Disclosure programme that aired last night. I know that people will be concerned, but from the outset today I want to reassure every pregnant woman and their family in the strongest possible terms that our maternity and neonatal services in Scotland are safe. Our hospitals are the safest possible place to give birth and ensure access to the best possible care. Any death or injury in maternity and neonatal services is a tragedy for a family, and I found it incredibly difficult to read and listen to the experiences of people who were excited to be extending their family but are instead mourning the loss of their loved ones. I want to take this opportunity to extend my deepest condolences to Laurie Quaid, to Jackie Hunter's husband and father of baby Olivia, and to the families of baby Freya Murphy and baby Mason Scott McLean, who so bravely shared their stories for last night's BBC Disclosure programme. I also wish to convey my deepest condolences to those families who have lost cherished loved ones in the care of NHS Lothian maternity services. Presiding Officer, this is an incredibly sensitive and emotive issue, and one that will be felt across the chamber. I haven't spoken about this before, but my family knows personally what it is like to suffer pregnancy loss. Indeed, during that experience, I also very nearly lost my wife due to inaccurate assessments of ectopic pregnancy symptoms, and that stays with me every day. Our family's experience differs from the families featured on the Disclosure programme and the HIS review, but I can absolutely understand the pain, the grief and the trauma they experienced. This makes me even more grateful to the families who have come forward, and I share their personal determination to ensure urgent improvements are made. Presiding Officer, I acknowledge today the commitment of our staff in maternity services across Scotland, who continue to provide kind and caring support to families. I thank our hard-working midwives, nurses, doctors, clinicians and the wider NHS support staff who dedicate their lives to maternity care and to perform such an important role in our NHS. They care for families during the most exciting and indeed anxious time in their lives, witnessing the miracle of birth every day. But I also recognise there are also deeply challenging times when something doesn't go to plan, and it is our NHS maternity staff who are there to offer families that compassionate and supportive care. I know that myself, and many others across this chamber will have a deep personal gratitude for the role that maternity care staff have provided to their families. And before I turn to the substantive content of the HIS report today, I want to provide members and the public with some important points of assurance. Firstly, Scotland has made significant progress in the last 20 years in reducing the risks associated with childbirth. Infant mortality has significantly reduced, as has stillbirth, to its lowest level in 2024. And while neonatal deaths have also reduced, we commissioned a review of neonatal mortality chaired by Dr Helen McTeer, which published last year to understand what more needs to be done to reduce this further. The findings of that review led Healthcare Improvement Scotland to announce the commencement of their safe delivery of care inspections into acute maternity units across Scotland, a decision which the Scottish Government fully supported and backed. These inspections started earlier this year with the first report into NHS Tayside's 9 Wells maternity unit, which published in May, and the second report into the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh, which published today. While I know maternity and neonatal services are safe and the vast majority of women and their families have good experiences, the work by HIS will help ensure we address issues as have been found in Lothian today. It is also important that expectant parents have accurate information available to them, and members will be aware of some misinformation circulating both in the media and on social media in recent weeks regarding Scotland's neonatal services model. To be clear, no neonatal units are closing. We are consolidating care for the smallest and sickest babies in 3 specialist units so that they can have the best chance of survival. Pregnant women can access accurate information and advice on services available to them via NHS Inform. I am deeply disappointed and concerned by the findings in the HIS report, particularly those relating to the experiences of women giving birth. I want to reassure Parliament that I have sought and received direct assurances from NHS Lothian's Chief Executive that the Health Board is providing a package of support to women and families using its maternity services, including a helpline which will be available today. The report highlights a number of concerning findings, specifically related to the oversight of patient safety, staffing levels leading to delays in care, staff feeling overwhelmed, unsupported and not listened to, gaps in incident reporting and poor communication with women. I'm also incredibly grateful and incredibly concerned about the findings relating to poor culture. Every member of staff deserves to feel valued, respected and supported at work, and their well-being should never be compromised. We will not tolerate these issues in our NHS. I appreciate the bravery of the nurses and midwives who spoke out, both in the BBC Disclosure Programme and to his. This is how change and improvement happens. On Monday night, I met with NHS Lothian's Chief Executive to discuss these issues and the wider concerns around patient safety oversight, leadership, staff well-being and delays in care. We are taking these concerns extremely seriously, and I expect NHS Lothian to act immediately to implement all 26 requirements from the HIS report. I do also recognise the report highlights some positive points, including respectful, responsive care, good teamwork and improvements in maternity triage. It highlights the dedication, the hard work and compassionate care of staff working in challenging circumstances, and I thank those staff in Edinburgh Royal Infirmary for their commitment and tireless efforts to support mothers and babies in often difficult circumstances. In December, I directed the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Nursing Officer to work directly with Lothian on the issues that I became aware of at that time. HIS undertook an unannounced visit in March and the written inspection visit in June. The Board has since made some improvements, in particular to maternity triage, and NHS Lothian have also told me about their £1.5 million investment in additional staff, which they say has recruited 70 new midwives to the service, 30 of whom are already in place. I have also been assured that necessary staffing changes have been made and that leadership has been bolstered, for example, with the appointment of a dedicated Associate Medical Director for Women's Services and a range of cultural improvement initiatives, including the development of a culture charter. However, I still have significant concerns about the pace and the momentum of change, and I am clear that we must see urgent improvements. That is why the Scottish Government has taken the decision to escalate NHS Lothian maternity services to level 3 of the NHS support and intervention framework. This intervention will provide significantly enhanced support and scrutiny of the improvement activity that NHS Lothian have outlined in their action plan. In escalating to Stage 3, I expect to see evidence of improvements before the end of the year, particularly in relation to staff recruitment, training and development and handling of adverse events. I will be meeting with the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian again before the end of November to discuss progress on improvements. Looking at the wider context, I have been asked to consider whether we should initiate a review of maternity and neonatal services. Our utmost priority will always be the safety and well-being of mothers and their babies, and our staff must always be a priority for our NHS. In Scotland, we are working towards our shared vision of continuous improvement in maternity services, and whilst Healthcare Improvement Scotland inspection reports are in some cases going to make for difficult reading for government and health boards, I fully back the programme and it is working exactly as intended. This intelligence-led, independent inspection programme for acute maternity services allows us to take a real-time and local approach, ensuring that lessons are learned quickly, improvements are made without delay and that good practice is shared widely. The inspections are giving us vital insight into what is working in our maternity hospitals and what needs to change. It is holding services to account. The NHS Tayside and NHS Lothian reports demonstrate this. Local improvement plans and action plans are already delivering change on the ground. NHS Tayside have already delivered the vast majority of their improvement actions following their inspection, with the remainder due to be completed by the end of the year. This is the sort of positive improvement we want to see everywhere. As we get further into the inspection schedule, we are seeing themes emerging. This means we can focus now on actions to improve these areas. We have commissioned HIS to develop a set of detailed maternity standards that will describe the level of service we expect to be delivered in every maternity unit, and these standards will inform future inspections. Our Scottish Patient Safety Perinatal Programme, which has been operating for over 10 years, has also delivered a range of improvements in maternity services, such as safety huddles, perinatal care bundles and stillbirth care bundles. This programme will also be used to mobilise improvements that emerge from maternity inspections. On adverse events, when things go wrong, we expect boards to investigate fully. They must be open and honest with families about what happened and make sure lessons are learned to improve care. Last month, I wrote to every Health Board Chief Executive in Scotland to make clear my expectation that all boards work with Healthcare Improvement Scotland to improve the timeliness and quality of significant adverse event review investigations and reporting, and to provide regular reporting to HIS that strengthens oversight and scrutiny of these. And to further strengthen our national oversight, I can announce today that the establishment of a new Scottish Maternity and Neonatal Task Force. This will provide strategic national leadership and will be chaired by the Minister for Public Health and Women's Health. The group will include senior figures from across our health system, independent bodies, third sector and advocacy organisations. It will report to myself and will complement the existing audit and inspection system in place in Scotland. I want the voices of women's experiences of maternity services to be heard, as well as the voice of frontline midwives, and will make sure that they are part of the task force and that we listen to them. Furthermore, I am meeting with Scotland's new Patient Safety Commission in November, and I will take that opportunity to discuss maternity services with her. Finally, presiding officers, members will be aware I have also reached out to health spokespeople from across this chamber, inviting them to meet with me and the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian to discuss the findings of the HIS report in more detail. Presiding officer, our commitment to continuous improvement across our NHS is vital. We must empower our services and our staff to make the necessary changes we need to ensure the safest and highest quality maternity services in Scotland. I know members will support me in this vision, and I welcome the opportunity for any questions in the Chamber may have at this time.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons. And I call Sandesh Gulhani.
Thank you. As a father of 2 young children and a practising NHS GP who works closely with NHS staff and patients, this issue is particularly close to my heart. And I welcome Neil Gray bringing this urgent statement today. Like all in this chamber, I am sickened, appalled and frankly terrified to read the findings of this report, and my thoughts are with new mothers and families who have experienced this trauma firsthand and the staff who have suffered. This traumatic report highlighted a number of serious issues in our health service: dangerously low staffing levels, a culture of fear, cover-ups, a failure to listen to families and a refusal to learn from mistakes that have been made, with pure luck seeming to get staff through sometimes. Staff and mothers have been raising the alarm for years, but these warnings were silenced, and this has shamefully put mothers and babies in harm's way. And let's be clear, 2 out of 4 hospitals in the Highlands haven't been inspected for almost a decade. We can't rely upon the BBC to show our problems. Presiding officer, the buck stops with the Cabinet Secretary. After nearly 2 decades of SNP mismanagement, our health service is in permanent crisis mode, and until they fix the dire workforce planning, nothing will change. Surely, with the new task force, the Cabinet Secretary will halt the Best Start implementation of downgrading maternity services. Given the severity of this report, why have NHS board members not been held accountable? And what is the timeline of these 26 recommendations being implemented in full?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First and foremost, I share, as I did in my statement, my thoughts with all those families that have been impacted and indeed the staff that have come forward. I made that clear in my statement. So I share the sentiments that Sandesh Gulhani sets out. On staffing, I addressed in my statement the steps that have been taken by NHS Lothian to recruit more staff. The staffing complement for midwifery and nursing in Scotland has gone up under this government, but I am not complacent to that, which is why it's important that we keep these matters under review and why the safe staffing legislation is so important to ensure the continued safety of our services. I will not tolerate under any circumstances. I have made this plain the time I have been in office and have done again in the discussions I had with the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian, any fear of staff reporting poor standards, poor behaviour or seeking to raise concerns. I will not tolerate that culture. I expect a speak-up culture within the NHS, and I've made that plain to all board chief executives and chairs, and this serves as a reminder as to why that is so important. I've already set out in my statement the position around neonatal services. That position has been underscored by midwives at NHS Tayside and indeed Bliss, saying that this is the right model for us to follow. And on accountability, I can't go into detail about HR or employment matters, as I know Dr Gulhani will understand, but changes have been made and leadership has been strengthened in NHS Lothian.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. For years, midwives have issued warnings about the sustainability of services, but it seems the Cabinet Secretary has not fully listened. Our hard-working, dedicated staff are facing mounting pressures and an increasing workload. The Cabinet Secretary has been told this many times by the profession. Junior midwives are being forced to enter the profession with limited mentorship and support. And the Government mentions an increase in midwife numbers, but what about the numbers of whole-time equivalent staff, unfilled shifts and the changing complexities of cases, which has been raised by the profession? Staff on the ground are burnt out, and it is clear that urgent action is needed. Today, the Cabinet Secretary has announced a new Scottish maternity and neonatal task force, but after months, many of the nursing and midwifery task force recommendations are not actually implemented. Some haven't been started. So I ask the Cabinet Secretary, how can Parliament be confident that the new task force will ensure the delivery of better outcomes for staff and patients on the ground, and has the Cabinet Secretary ensured tight timeframes for reporting on this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Carol Mockin for her questions. On the point of listening and hearing, at the point that I became aware of concerns around NHS Lothian in December, I instructed the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Nursing Officer to support NHS Lothian. At the point at which the report from his had been shared with me last week, I made plain to NHS Lothian my expectation of an immediate response and for those recommendations in the report to be set out, and I wish to satisfy myself that the Government has done everything possible and is doing everything possible to ensure the public confidence and staff confidence in maternity services, not just in NHS Lothian, but as we have heard last night as a result of the BBC Disclosure documentary around Scotland. It's for boards to employ staff and to ensure the right staff skill mix, but I hear Carol Mockin's concerns around ensuring that that is appropriate, given what the concerns have been raised in the HIS report around NHS Lothian. I raised those concerns directly with the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian on Monday night and received assurances around her commitment to ensuring safe staffing and an increase in staffing levels, and to ensure the right skill mix is in place. And I expect that in all boards, not just because of a report from HIS. In terms of the Nursing and Midwifery Task Force, I expect pace in the implementation of those recommendations. I'll be working with the new Chief Nursing Officer who is coming into post in the next couple of weeks to ensure that is the case. And on reporting, I set out in my statement my expectation of immediate action from NHS Lothian, and I'll be following up with the Chief Executive by the end of November.
Claire Adamson, to be followed by Ros McCall.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his statement and for recognising the concerns across maternity services, families and staff across the whole country. He has outlined his own empathy with this situation and his interest in maternity services, particularly in neonatal services. This has been of interest to my constituents, and as a fellow MSP from NHS Lanarkshire area, he will know the concerns that have been raised about the Best Start programme. However, misinformation means that many of my constituents are concerned that the neonatal unit is closing. As we know, this is not the case. It's specialist services which will now be centred nearest to us in Glasgow, where already they perform neonatal surgery, which is unavailable currently at Wishaw. Given this, can he clearly outline the decisions around Best Start, how parents and families will be supported if their baby is transferred, and can he again reassure that the neonatal unit in Wishaw Hospital is not closing?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I did make reference to this element in my statement because I have been concerned about the misinformation that has been reported. I thank Claire Adamson for her question and I thank the incredible staff at the neonatal unit at Wishaw General Hospital for the incredible life-saving work that they do. I am aware of the recent press and social media coverage in relation to both the Wishaw and Nine Wells neonatal units, and I'd like to state my concern about that misinformation. My utmost priority, and that of ministers, will always be the families here in Scotland, and the fear and alarm that this could be causing is distressing. No neonatal units are closing. No neonatal units are closing. We are consolidating care for the smallest and sickest babies in 3 specialist units at the Queen Elizabeth in Glasgow, at the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary and Aberdeen Maternity Hospital, so that they have the best chance of survival. And I would like to make clear the reasons why the decision has been made to improve that model of neonatal care in Scotland. This is the announced new model from the Best Start 2017 report. It follows clinical evidence that providing specialist care in units that care for higher numbers of very preterm babies gives the best survival chances and clinical outcomes. These are babies who are born at less than 27 weeks gestation, weigh less than 800 grams, or need multiple complex intensive care interventions or surgery. In Scotland, this will mean that only 50 to 60 babies who are born at the extremes of prematurity and a small number of the very sickest babies who require, for example, neonatal surgery, receive care through this model, with the vast majority of over 4,500 premature babies continuing to receive care in the units closest to their home.
Thank you. I fully appreciate the sensitivity of these issues, and I am very keen to enable as many members as possible to take part in this session, and I'd be grateful if we could, if we were succinct, that would enable more members to be involved. I call Ros McCall, to be followed by Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Following last night's BBC Disclosure programme, which highlighted the harrowing experience of a patient from 2020, I was approached by a constituent who experienced similar issues with her maternity care at Nine Wells. Her baby was dropped by a doctor. She was given drugs which were later described as unsafe in her condition, and she was told to remove a surgical bandage herself in the toilets 24 hours after birth rather than getting the correct support from staff. So given the Cabinet Secretary mentioned in his statement the progress that NHS Tayside's Local Improvement Action Plan, what reassurances can he give my constituent and other women that these improvements will be sufficient to ensure safety? And I note his comments on accountability for NHS Lothian, but how will the Scottish Government ensure NHS boards are held accountable, especially as we're talking about one of the most vulnerable moments in a woman's life?
Cabinet Secretary.
Ros McCall is absolutely right. That is why it's so important that we do get this right. I would, at my apologies to the Ros McCall's constituent who contacted her with those details. That's clearly a very distressing situation, and I would appreciate being furnished with those details so that I can follow up with NHS Tayside to ensure the necessary response to that and the ongoing care needs of that family are in place. His have carried out an inspection of Nine Wells. There are recommendations that are in train and to be not just accepted but being implemented. I expect all of those to be completed by the end of this year, and off the back of the intervention that Ros McCall has come forward with, I'll make sure that that case is also highlighted and lessons can be learned.
Emma Harper, to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the maternity issues raised by local people and us local MSPs in Wigtonshire regarding the provision of rural maternity services. Safety has always been my primary concern when addressing this. What assurances can he give to constituents in rural and more remote areas like the South West region about the provision of safe maternity services, and can he provide some feedback regarding the recent meeting that the Government had with the local action group?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I fully recognise the importance of these issues for the people of Wigtonshire that Emma Harper represents, and I know my ministerial colleagues share that understanding. All women, irrespective of where they live, should receive high-quality, safe maternity care tailored to their individual needs and circumstances. The implementation of continuity of midwifery care through our Best Start programme is a key part of this, and we are confident that overall maternity services in Scotland are safe and that the system of unannounced inspections gives us real-time assurance on quality and safety. As Emma Harper highlights, I visited Dumfries and Galloway earlier this month and met with service leaders and community groups on the 15th of October, including the Galloway Hospital Community Action Group, to hear directly about these issues. Following that meeting, I have asked NHS Dumfries and Galloway for further information. I will share that with the Galloway Community Hospital Action Group.
Jackie Bailey, to be followed by Fulton McGregor.
The risks to mothers and babies outlined in the report and on the BBC disclosure programme are incredibly worrying. Now, the Cabinet Secretary is reducing specialist neonatal provision at Wishaw and elsewhere, and mothers and the sickest babies from that area could travel 3 hours to Aberdeen because Glasgow is regularly full. In fact, Glasgow send their overspill to Wishaw. Mothers in Caithness and Stranraer are having to travel hundreds of miles to give birth, and I met with them recently. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to include provision of remote and rural areas in the task force work and review Best Start, where we could have 5 specialist neonatal units, not the 3 that the Government have settled for?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Jackie Bailey for her questions. I am happy to consider the ask around the task force, whether it can have that specialist look at rural and island community midwifery services. I don't accept the characterisation that she sets out around the Best Start model, and it's not true. And I do not accept the characterisation that she set out. Ensuring the safest possible care that has been recommended by clinicians, that has been supported by Bliss and supported by midwives, including in 9 Wells, is the model that we should be following to ensure the best outcomes for these babies.
Fulton McGregor, to be followed by Lorna Slater.
Thank you, President Officer. I should say at the outset that as an MSP I hear a lot of positive stories about maternity care, and myself and my family have also had 3 very positive and happy experiences in Lanarkshire at Wishes Maternity. However, although not directly relating to the situation in Edinburgh, this week I met with a constituent who reported having had very difficult maternity experiences at all stages, including the pre-birth, the birth and the aftercare. I have now written to you, Cabinet Secretary, about this, so I will not go into the full details just now. However, at the heart of my constituent's complaint is her feeling not heard in terms of the treatment and care that she received. So I can ask what more can be done to ensure that services learn from these types of experiences, as well as those in Lothian, so that all mothers feel like an integral part of the care and decision-making process when pregnant and giving birth.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Fulton McGregor for his question. I know that he wrote to me yesterday, and I intend to ensure that he gets a full response to that correspondence. He is absolutely right that women deserve answers, transparency, honesty and openness in terms of the care that they receive. That was a theme of concern that came through from the HES report in NHS Lothian, and one that I am absolutely clear with the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian must change and must improve. He is absolutely right that women must receive information that is appropriate to their needs, and they must, when they have questions about their care, including where there has been mistakes or failures, that those must be properly investigated and fully resolved.
Lorna Slater, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
NHS Lothian has responded to his inspection report, citing their improvement plan and apologising to staff for the working culture and staff shortages. And although I'm sure we all welcome their recruitment of 70 new midwives, that is a staggering level of understaffing. That NHS Lothian were short more than 70 midwives. That whistleblowers had to sound the alarm about patient and staff safety. How is it that the Scottish Government didn't know what was happening in our maternity services? And how will the Minister take us from an NHS culture of reacting to bad news to one of proactively assessing and evaluating the state of our NHS services so that we don't end up in this situation again?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I appreciate the concern that Lorna Slater has set out around the revelations about staffing levels within the HIS report in NHS Lothian. I share those concerns. I said as much to the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian on Monday night. I said that I expect that staffing complement to be resolved and for the skill mix within that staffing complement to also be properly addressed. In terms of ensuring that we respond rather than react to this situation, I've been clear around the inspection regime that is in place with Healthcare Improvement Scotland, which is part of the reason why I'm stood here today taking questions about these matters, because we are uncovering where there is challenge. We are finding those areas of success and sharing experience of both to ensure that we can learn and ensure that we provide safer services going forward.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by Miles Briggs.
I've been working with Laurie Quaite for some time. He lost, as you saw in the programme last night, Presiding Officer, that he lost his wife and daughter within 24 hours of each other. It was a traumatising experience. So I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement today, but what it does acknowledge is not whether there's a problem, but there is a problem. Because all of those are not isolated cases, but there is a problem with the system as a whole, because we've seen with the inspections in Lothian and in Tayside that that is the case. So the question now is, how do we deliver change? And I accept the Cabinet Secretary set out a series of procedures that he's got and processes, and also a new task force. But if he finds through that task force that a national investigation is required in order to stimulate adequate change across the country, that he will agree to such an investigation, because it is important that we learn the lessons from this, rather than this being forgotten as a one-time episode. So will he consider a national investigation if that's what the task force finds?
Cabinet Secretary.
I very much appreciate the testimony that's been put on the record by Willie Rennie, and I again offer my condolences to Laurie Quaite for what is unspeakable, unimaginable pain and torture that he must be experiencing, and I'm grateful to him for his support and representation on his behalf. I have set out in my statement the steps that I believe we can and are taking around his inspection regime. But of course, I remain open-minded should the further information come to light, should the discussions I have with the Patient Safety Commissioner, or indeed any information come through his reviews, requiring us for a more national oversight, then of course I will consider that. I think that it is important that we act now rather than waiting on the outcome of our review, and I think that his inspection regime allows us to operate live to ensure we're addressing concerns and problems where they're arising on a localised basis.
Miles Briggs, to be followed by Ruth Maguire.
Midwives in Edinburgh have told me that they often feel like they are landing planes, with expectant mothers being told to sit in car parks or to go home. In one case, an expectant mother told me about giving birth on a bathroom floor. This trauma has meant that the family have decided not to have any more children. Now, this seems to be happening too often, Cabinet Secretary, so can I ask what reporting of these incidents is going to take place under the reviews which he's outlined to make sure that the task force takes into consideration often these situations which are not being reported?
Cabinet Secretary.
I absolutely recognise that a traumatic experience such as that Miles Briggs has put on the record and was put on the record in the disclosure programme can lead to families making very difficult choices about their family composition. I cannot imagine the challenge that is at play in those situations. There are significant adverse event review processes in place in the NHS across Scotland. As I said in my statement, I have written to all board chief executives setting out my expectations around the speed and timeliness and the robustness of those. And as he has pointed to, I expect the task force to be able to look at some of those to ensure that it's informed around the actions that need to be taken, should they need to be taken.
Ruth Maguire, to be followed by Sue Webber.
Presiding Officer, any negative childbirth experience can have both short and long-term adverse consequences for women and their babies. It's been linked to difficulties with breastfeeding, poor self-rated health, post-traumatic stress and postnatal depression. What assurance can the Cabinet Secretary provide that support is available to women who, due to feeling fearful or being in physical distress, have had a negative experience of childbirth?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Ruth Maguire is absolutely right, and that's why we published our Pathways of Maternity Care in February this year to set out the core care that all women and their babies should receive during the antenatal, interpartum and postnatal periods. The pathways provide that all women should be given the opportunity to discuss their maternity journey with their midwife prior to their discharge from maternity services, and that any appropriate referrals to other services should be made at this time. I would encourage any woman with any worries or concerns about either their lack of either their current pregnancy or with previous birth experience to speak to the midwife in their first instance to ensure they receive the appropriate care and support tailored to their individual needs and circumstances.
Sue Webber, to be followed by Paul McLennan.
Presiding Officer, we've known about these issues for over a year. In August 2024, new mother Louise Williamson spoke about her horrific labour after she was repeatedly ignored. In December, in a verbal briefing to Lothian MSPs and MPs entitled Women's Services Concerns, NHS Lothian advised action was underway. And further assurances were given to the same group on progress on the 20th of June 2025. Yet 3 days later, on the 23rd of June, an unannounced HIS inspection confirmed that nothing had changed. Women deserve to know that their maternity services are safe. And today, NHS Lothian told MSPs that these issues will take time to resolve. What confidence, Cabinet Secretary, can families have that this time there will be real, tangible changes?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's not true to say that nothing has changed. The HIS report itself explicitly goes into detail about the improvements that have been made in the maternity triage processes that have improved and have been given a good scoring. I do share the concern, though, and I've set this out in my statement, about the pace of progress. That is why NHS Lothian has been escalated to level 3 for its maternity services, because I share that concern that she outlines about the pace of progress and its speed, and it's why I'll be meeting again to provide Sue Webber and her constituents and others across the chamber with that reassurance of the completion of all the recommendations imminently. I'm meeting with the Chief Executive of NHS Lothian by the end of this month, in November, in order to ensure that there is that progress being made.
Paul McLennan, to be followed by Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The report published following the HIS report in June stated that staff are working hard to provide compassionate and responsive care in various difficult circumstances. It made 26 requirements for improvement and escalated serious concerns about the unit to NHS Lothian and the Scottish Government. One of the main issues it mentioned in the report was delays and escalation of care, and this resulted in, I quote, significant adverse outcomes for women. What can you say to reassure pregnant women in my area, in East Lothian and NHS Lothian, around about this particular area, and what action has been taken now and has been since the inspection in that regard?
Cabinet Secretary.
Paul McLennan for raising these points, which will be incredibly important to the constituents he represents in East Lothian. As I said in my statement, I know that people will be concerned. I am concerned, but from the outset today, I want to reassure every pregnant woman and their families in the strongest possible terms that our maternity and neonatal services in Scotland are safe. Our hospitals are the safest possible place to give birth and ensure access to the best possible care. When I met with NHS Lothian's Chief Executive earlier this week, she outlined the extensive package of work that the board have put in place already to address the findings of the report, recognising that some of these issues will take time to resolve. I impressed upon her my direction that this must be resolved as quickly as possible. She also outlined improvements they have already made. This includes the investment of £1.5 million in staffing, which has led to the recruitment of more than 70 additional midwives, 30 of whom are already in post, and the rest will be by the end of December. Leadership has been bolstered with the appointment of a dedicated Associate Medical Director for Women's Services, and they have invested in staff training. NHS Lothian have published their externally commissioned review of culture in May, and maternity teams are developing their own culture charter. So I want to assure Paul McLennan that I take these concerns extremely seriously, and I expect NHS Lothian to act immediately to implement the 26 requirements.
Thank you. I'm keen to take all members who have pressed. I would be grateful if we could be succinct. I call Jeremy Balfour to be followed by Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, President Officer. President Officer, from personal experience, I know when our first daughter died, the care and love that was given by the maternity unit here in Edinburgh. But clearly there is an issue going on, and I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement this afternoon. Would he commit to coming back to this chamber early next year to give us an update on how things are progressing in Lothian? Because I'm afraid many of us in the city do not have the confidence that these changes will happen quickly or efficiently, as he has outlined in his statement today.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Jeremy Balfour for sharing his very sad loss, and my condolences to him for the pain and trauma that is experienced in those circumstances. I have set out very clearly my expectation to NHS Lothian to come forward with improvements. I've set timelines on when I expect to hear more by the end of November. I am more than happy to ensure that Parliament can be kept informed, whether that is through a statement or a GIQ or a letter to committee. I'm more than happy to ensure that Parliament is kept informed of progress.
Stephen Kerr to be followed by Megan Gallagher.
President Officer, I would like to express my gratitude for the courage of whistleblowing NHS staff, because it's their willingness to speak up that is key to a transformed culture of continual improvement. And I know that the Cabinet Secretary knows that families affected by maternity tragedies are too often left in the dark, while his and NHS boards appear to be passing responsibility between them for transparency and accountability. So I ask, what assurance can the Cabinet Secretary give that health boards will not go on managing reputational risk, but instead will ensure that significant adverse event reviews in maternity cases are published, learned from and acted upon?
Cabinet Secretary.
Stephen Kerr for his question. I know the long-standing interest that he has in supporting whistleblowers, for which I'm very grateful. I share his desire to see that speak-up culture within our health service. I have made that abundantly clear on numerous occasions, publicly and in this Parliament and to our NHS board chairs and chief executives. I share that need for us to see a speak-up culture, because that is where we get progress, improvement and learning. I share his concern around ensuring family information is shared transparently. I have written, as I said in my statement, to NHS board chief executives, setting out my expectations around the timeliness and the robustness of significant adverse event reviews. He will understand why it is challenging to see them published, but I'm more than happy to have further conversations about how that is working.
Megan Gallagher to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that I, alongside other colleagues in this chamber, have campaigned to stop the downgrading of Wishaw General Neonatal Department. The Scottish Government might wish to use the term centralisation, but when you're removing specialised services from a neonatal department, that is downgrading. That's not misinformation. That is a fact. I've also campaigned to secure overnight accommodation for parents of babies in neonatal wards, as there are not enough beds at present. Again, this is another area that the Scottish Government have not acted quickly enough on. So will the Cabinet Secretary use this time today to confirm through this new task force that, as Jackie Bailey outlined, that there will be a review of the Best Start model and have 5 specialised neonatal units as opposed to 3? And can he give an update on the number of beds available for parents who need to stay with their babies in neonatal departments across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I've set out already in response to Jackie Bailey and in response to Claire Adamson around the Government's position around neonatal services in Scotland. This is based on expert clinical advice and ensuring that we are providing the best possible care to the sickest babies, the most vulnerable babies in Scotland who need access to the most specialist care. I think I've set that out clearly. I am sympathetic and I am willing to look at what Megan Gallagher sets out around overnight accommodation in neonatal settings, and I will respond to her in writing with more detail on that.
And Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I should declare an interest here that I have a daughter who is a midwife. I think listening to the Cabinet Secretary's statement and listening to the questions and answers today, it spins me back nearly to the start of my political career, nearly 10 years ago, when one of my first cases was around one of my constituents who had tragically lost a child in childbirth. And over an extended period of time, we worked out that there was nearly 24 neonatal staff short at Crosshouse, to which, of course, that was addressed. But here we are, nearly a decade later, and I think my colleague raised the issue of reputational management. How do we get past local authorities, NHS boards, binning this idea of protecting reputational management so that we can learn from mistakes that are made?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Brian Whittle for that. I understand that Brian Whittle's constituent did speak to and give evidence to the Patient Safety Commissioner on these issues. And as I said to Stephen Kerr, as I say again to Brian Whittle, I am absolutely clear in my expectations around the culture of the NHS. And indeed, I expect wider public services around candour, around disclosure and transparency. I am not interested in the protection of reputations. I'm interested in ensuring the safe delivery of services and for our staff to feel confident in ensuring that they can raise concerns where they are and that they can go about their jobs to deliver the incredible, world-leading, compassionate, professional care that they do in the NHS here in Scotland.
Thank you. That concludes the urgent statement.